everyone, I hope you're doing really well. My name is Aveline from the Empath's Guide Book Reviews and Writer's Corner, and I'm here today to do my very first writing tips video, which I'm very excited about. So I've been writing fiction for just a little over a year, and so while I'm in no way a professional, I think that I've learned some things along the way that I've found personally very useful. It would be a privilege for me to share these things I've learned with you, and I hope that I can be of any assistance. The topic that I've decided to cover today is called finding the time to write. A writer writes, and so when you don't have the time to write, it's like, are you a writer at all? And it's a great loss. I mean, I don't know how many story ideas and amazing books are kept away from the treasures of this world and of history because people just haven't blocked out a little bit of time in their day to write. I think that when we say we don't have the time to write, it's not that we're always finding excuses. Also, there are so many demands of modern life that are fair enough. I think the Buddha said there are duties that a householder has to do, and these duties are basically to earn your keep and provide for your family. So a lot of our time is taken up by these duties like working full-time or studying. And then on top of that, you've got social commitments that are necessary for living a full life, anniversaries, weddings, meeting up with friends on the weekend, cultural celebrations, all these things are important. And then I feel like the remainder of our time is usually spent zoning out. It's like we've been on autopilot all week long, people are making all these demands of us, and it's just draining. So by the time that Friday night or Sunday night comes along, all we want to do is just end up on the couch and just plug in our recharge wire into the socket and just do something really mindless like watch TV or scroll down our Facebook news feed or go on Instagram or play with a dog, which can all be really fun. Zoning out is quite important, I think, in the modern world to recharge. But at the same time, it creates this practical problem of when do we find the energy and time to write. Here are a few tips that I've put together from my experiences. Disclaimer, I'm in no way perfect with organizing my writing time. I still make excuses. I still sometimes zone out and watch an extra episode of Seinfeld or Merlin when I should be writing, but I definitely have got better, so I hope what I say can be of some assistance. Number one tip is stop telling yourself that there is no time. Time is basically an illusion, okay? It is a mental construct that humans have created, and if we were to today, hypothetically, to throw out all our clocks and all our calendars, we wouldn't have this limited thing called time anymore, but instead we just have this endless space of existence that makes up our lives. I've started to think of it as just, what do I have to do each morning when I wake up, and what do I need to prioritize and create a habit out of in order to one day look back on my life and say that I lived a life that I can be proud of. I feel like using time as an excuse, while it's such a common habit that we all have, is not really a helpful habit. I mean, and our beliefs really do create our reality. So if you tell yourself constantly and enough times that there is no time, your brain will actually believe that and act accordingly, and it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy and you will just have no time. That will be your new reality. If you really want to write and write consistently, just throw it out. Go on, just chuck it out. That belief that there is no time to write, because there is time and it is all around and it is just the now. The second thing was really to ask myself, why am I writing? When I did this, I just recorded a video on my Mac and just thought of all the reasons about why I love to write. I mean, I was in a slump, and just remembering the kind of deeper reasons that I love to write and how it's kind of connected to my soul purpose and my driving values of creativity, healing, and compassion really helped me to remember, why I was doing this. And it really helps when you're asking the question of why am I writing, not just to have some vague answer like, because I like writing. Because chances are, if you're watching this video, you do like writing and that's a given. But make it deeper and make it meaningful for now, because chances are you probably also like watching TV, maybe Game of Thrones, or playing with your dog, or eating lots of cake if you're anything like me. Silence! So in that moment where 1,000,010 things, distracting things are vying for your attention and you have to choose between one of those awesome things and writing, if your only reason to choose writing is because you like writing, you're probably going to pick one of the easier things to do. Our brains are actually hardwired to do the easiest thing at any given time and move away from the most uncomfortable thing. And so having a motivation, a deeper motivation, is really important, and you won't need to hang on to it forever. The thing with habits is that it actually only takes 21 days, about 21 days, to create a habit and to hardwire that process of writing into your brain. For about 21 days, you'll need some sort of willpower, and that willpower is helped a lot just by having a strong motivation about why you are writing. The third thing that I will say, which is very much linked to that, is create daily habits and not goals. I can almost hear a lot of you saying, what's wrong with goals? Aren't goals really important in life to get where you want to get? And I would say yes and no. It's important to have a vision of where you want your life to be. But at the same time, in some ways, a goal can sometimes be a fantasy because it is not concrete. It is something that exists in the mind and in the far future. And I think the main problem with goals is that we can always change them. And so when we don't feel like writing, we can just change our goals, so it makes sense that we don't have to write that day. But instead of focusing on goals, I think it's really important to focus on habits, because a habit is something that you have now. You have this in the present moment, and you are in control of it right now, today. It's a lot more helpful, I think, to focus on habits, and it stops you also becoming overwhelmed by this big picture and this mountain that you want to get to, which can be so overwhelming that you obsess about all the little steps and how much you have to write to actually publish a book or start a blog. If you just focus on the one smallest thing that you can do today consistently, and that will build up over time to move you steadily towards the top of the mountain or the goal or wherever you want to be, without you actually having to think about and focus on and possibly obsess about goals. So how do you create a daily writing habit? This doesn't have to be a scary thing. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to chain yourself to the desk or go and meditate on a mountaintop. I just want to maybe do an exercise at first. So if you can, just picture in your mind and think of the number of minutes that you think you could write every day, and do this fairly consistently and keep it up every day. So just think about that for a few moments.
A few moments later.
Okay, so now that you've got a number of minutes in your mind of how much you think you could consistently write every day, focus on that. Excellent. Now I want you to halve it. The reason that I'm saying to halve it is because I think that when we start a new habit, we're often full of all this motivation and energy and inspiration, and it's a great thing, it's a great feeling. But often the feeling that we have of this inspiration tends to fizzle out because we're humans, and after a while it tends to feel more like work rather than play, which is very normal. And if you can't actually meet the goal that you started off with, if it is quite a high expectation of yourself, you're going to feel quite down on yourself for not meeting that goal. And that annoyance at yourself and feeling of failure at yourself for not doing what you committed to is going to create an aversion to the habit even more. And you're going to move away from it and do it even less. And so before you know it, whether it be half a week or a month, the habit could start to fizzle out. I would say, instead of picking the number of minutes that you originally did, just to halve that and stick to that. So it doesn't actually matter how long this is for. And I would actually suggest, if you are just starting out creating a new daily writing habit, To make it as short as possible, I mean, you don't even have to make it half an hour, because that could be excruciating if you haven't sat down to write for that long before. So even if you need to make it 10 minutes to start off with, and if that doesn't work, cut it down to 5 minutes. If that doesn't work, you can even cut it down to 2.5 minutes. If you consistently find that you are missing 2 consecutive days in a row, it's okay to miss a day every now and then because we're human. But if you're missing 2 in a row, a lot of the time, halve the amount even further. And that is just so you can sustain the habit every day. And writing 5 minutes a day is way, way better than writing for even say 3 or 4 hours in a Sunday, and then having a week's space from your story or 2 weeks space. Because when you next sit down to write, it's going to feel like a foreign thing, and you're going to have lost your connection to the story or whatever it is you're writing. Just weave little bits of writing into your day whenever you can for the smallest possible time. And remember, you can always increase it, but you should wait for at least, I would say, 3 weeks until you have the habit fairly down to increase it very little by little in small increments, just because 3 weeks is a general time for creating a new habit. But everyone's different, so you might need longer to do this, but I would definitely recommend just doing it slowly so you get more into the habit of writing rather than having to write heaps, which is not necessary. Okay, so how do you do this? So a way that I think is pretty cool, which I would suggest, is if you can't really find a regular time to write every day, that's fine. You can actually create a little writer's kit and carry it around with you. So this writer's kit does not have to be anything fancy. I mean, for me, it's just basically a notepad, a few pens, and if I can, my laptop because it has my music on it, and my headphones. Carry this around with you in your bag, and whenever you get a spare slot of time that opens up in your day for your 5 minutes or your 10 minutes or even your 2.5 minutes, just create the habit of taking out your little writer's kit and just writing for that amount of time. You can set a timer on your phone, and you don't have to write anything grand. You know, you don't have to have a preconceived idea lined up. Just write whatever you feel, and just don't judge yourself on what you've written. Don't self-censor it, just write. And just get in the habit of doing that every day. If you're anything like me, if you do this over time, you'll start to find that 2.5 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes is actually not enough. Writing can actually start to feel like play again and not work. And I think this is the key. The real key over time to creating a lasting, sustainable writing habit is that you actually start to enjoy it. That is if you really don't know what your schedule is like. If you do know what your schedule is like and you would like to write at a set time per day, this actually has a lot of benefits to your brain, because your brain actually remembers the time that you write every day, and it's easier to create a habit and go back and write at that time. So if this is you, I would suggest that you figure out what your peak performance period is. The peak performance period is different for every person. Basically what we call a morning person or a night owl. It's very similar to that. It's the time that you work best in the day and that you are most creative. For me and a lot of other writers, their peak performance time is first thing in the morning. I think it's just easier because you're well rested, you've been in dreams, which are usually quite creative, so there's less of the thinking mind kicking in and the ego kicking in, and it just kind of flows a lot better. But if you are a night owl, don't worry about it, just write at night and slot in and schedule your time to do it every day regularly at that time, and have a trigger which helps remind you to do the writing habit. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy again. I mean, for me, my trigger, because I write in the morning, is just to have a cup of coffee. It works in 2 ways, because I like drinking my coffee, and also because I only drink coffee once a day in the morning. So as soon as I take a first sip of that coffee, I'm just like wired to know, okay, this is writing time. So I just go straight to my writing desk, and I don't even think about it or have that mental noise that you can get. So triggers are also really useful. The last thing that I will address is, why do I need to write every day? This is a really good question. So my answer to this is that stories are not these inanimate objects. Stories are alive and they need your attention. And I think stories are a little bit like, you could say, a lover. At the start, when you get a new idea for a story, it's very inspired and you're feeling it and you want to spend all this time around this story to create it and nurture it and see where it goes, and it's all very exciting. This can last for a certain time, which is known as the honeymoon period. But after a certain time, it gets to a point where maybe you're not feeling it as much and you can't explain it and it just kind of happens, but it does happen. So instead of, not being able to wait for the time where you can go back to your story and see what happens, it kind of starts to feel more like work rather than play, perhaps. And this is the reason why you can't wait until you feel like it to start writing, because it will get to a point, no matter when it is along the way, that one day you just won't feel like doing it anymore. Even though deep down you love to do it, you just won't feel like it. There are other things competing for your attention. I watched a video recently about this by this life coach called Mel Robbins, and she says to use something called the 5-second rule. When we don't feel like doing something, our brains will look for the most comfortable and easiest thing to do instead. Actually, 5 seconds of time that passes between your brain going, I should do this, and then your brain going, I'll do something instead. Be aware of that 5-second period where you hesitate and you question and you rationalize. And aware of the fact that I don't feel like it. Then you can just remember your motivation, or just force yourself, or do your trigger that helps you do your habit. You can so much more easily get out of the feelings that are inhibiting you at this present moment and just go and do it. Because feelings are great, but sometimes they're not helpful when, stories can be hard work, and most of the time they're really fun, but they also involve work and commitment, and that's just the things that you put in order to accomplish the finished product. And when you write every day, it just creates this rhythm, and it's just so much easier to go back to your story. And that 5-second space of hesitation stops being so much of a thing. Habits are automatic, which is why daily writing habit is probably the best way to get you to write more, even if it's as little as 2.5 minutes a day. No one is judging you on the amount of time you write, as long as you are writing. Just doing your absolute best on this, and only you can know what your best is. Really. That is probably all for this video on finding the time to write. I hope that I have helped you figure out some ways in which you can weave more writing time into your day. I will also put a kind of written version of this video on my blog, An Empath's Guide to the Galaxy, which I will link below. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you liked and subscribed. If you'd like to discuss what you thought about this video and whether you found it helpful, or just little things that you have trouble with, definitely leave a comment below. I would love to hear what you think, because there are definitely still things that I struggle with. And yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with you and carry it on further. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to talk to you soon for this writing corner. And take care and lots of love. Bye.